have a $48 billion deficit. They're cutting services to citizens and freeing up billions so they can give out $150,000 home loans to people in the country illegally that will be backed by the state. Now, if somebody in the country illegally just happens to pick up and go home, I guess the people that, we the citizens are kind of stuck with the bill. Joining me on the program right now is Kamala Patterson, chair of the California GOP. Is there anything that the Democrats in your state won't give away? I mean, it's medical, it's the Medi-Cal, it's the home loans now, all this. I mean, is there anything they don't give the illegals?
Andrew, it is absolutely ridiculous. Just when you think you cannot make this up, it gets worse in the California legislature. We're actually now at a $68 billion deficit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said 46. Pardon me.
68. 68. It's ballooned up. Yes, and, that includes, $5 billion a year that is spent on free health care for illegal immigrants. Right now in California, we have the worst housing crisis in the entire nation, and that is largely due to Democrats' policies over-regulating the unaffordability crisis that they have created here in California. So much so that only 15% of Californians can afford to buy a home today in California. We have the highest median home price in the entire nation. And what we saw happen this weekend was just absolutely ludicrous. And it's ludicrous when the Democrats that are in tough districts refuse to vote on it. And that's what we're seeing over in Sacramento this past weekend. They are willing to stop at nothing. And when we have seen an increase of 140% of illegal border crossings under the Kamala Harris border czar era, we know that this is going to continue to be a magnet for that illegal immigration. This will not stop it. This will make sure it grows.
I don't know. I mean, I live in New Jersey, okay? We're kind of like a less likable California. We really are. But, I mean, the stuff that I see, maybe it's because Phil Murphy is just he's not an interesting guy, that his, lame policies don't make the national news. Gavin Newsom seems like, when I watched that debate with him and Ron DeSantis, he really thinks he's this suave, debonair guy that no matter how ridiculous his policies are, people are just going to swoon because he's just got so much rizz that, people are just going to follow him. I mean, I don't know. Your state is completely crazy.
Absolutely. And I love that you use the word Riz. But when we're looking at Gavin Newsom...
I have teenage daughters. I have a teenage daughter and one who's going to be 12 next month. I know my young people speak.
This is now going to be in Gavin Newsom's hands. He can either sign the bill or he can veto the bill and see what happens from there. But, what we saw over the weekend was a lack of democracy. When we were going into the assembly floor and the debate on bills was limited to 30 seconds, why even bother? And we saw it over and over again. In fact, when they tried to bring up the reparations bill, they wanted to have a hearing on every single one of these bills. They wanted to have true debate on every single one of these bills and get Democrats on record for where they stand with all of these things. We now have that record, and now it is up to Gavin Newsom. Does he have plans for 2028? And is he going to try and be the Democrats' nominee in 2028? Well, if he is, I think he's going to veto this bill.
Well, I do see that he is he's threatening to withhold state aid from cities that don't clean up homeless encampments because it's making him look bad. Right? It's not like he really cares about the problem. It makes him look bad.
What a change in tide we have had with that, right? This is the same person that told us it was incompassionate to take people off the streets from their quote unquote homes and to close down these campsites. And now he's out there cleaning them up. He's calling out his friends in the Democrat Party in Los Angeles, saying that they were not doing a good enough job. And it's just absolutely ludicrous from where he was and has been over the last decade, over the last 20 years on this issue. You'll remember, this was the guy who 20 years ago was going to end homelessness in San Francisco. $24 billion that we don't know where most of that money went. Later, we don't have a problem that's been fixed. Have a problem that's gotten much worse on the housing crisis.
You know, I have to wonder how many, because they're always talking about the rich, the rich, the rich. How many rich people that air fingers quote live in California don't really live in California, right? Like, a lot of these tech billionaires and celebrities, you know, they all have homes in like, you know, Sun Valley, Idaho, and Park City, Utah. I wonder how many of them are actually paying income tax in the state of California.
We're seeing it more and more, Andrew. It's that 6 months and 1 day policy. They may come out to California for the winter months, or sometimes they break up their years and just make sure they are not in the state for more than 6 months. And they are paying taxes elsewhere. That's why we see these numbers continue to increase. You talked about the ballooning of our deficit going up to $68 billion this year. This is because we are losing income from many of those high income earners, but we're also losing income tax from the middle class. So much of the middle class cannot afford to live here and will have a much better quality of life when they choose places like Texas, Florida, Nashville, in Tennessee, in Idaho, all of those states that you mentioned before. We're seeing the middle class leaving our state just as fast as we're seeing those high income earners. In fact, we lost a congressional seat for the first time in our state's history. It is not because the views from our oceans and our beautiful mountains, our wonderful Central Valley that feeds the entire world. None of that has changed. What has changed over the last 10 years is Democrat one-party rule, and they have failed Californians on every issue that's important.
You know, I see people in Chicago, in New York City, and in Boston, you know, all places dominated by Democrats. You have the story out of Boston, 150 kids, I forgot the bus, Staunton, were basically kicked off their school buses, and now they're busing, you know, people in the country illegally to school for free. People are shaking their fists at this as if they didn't vote for it. I'm waiting for what act of absurdity by the Democrats in these states, California, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, is enough, and you'll change how you vote, or at least create a more moderate strain of Democrat candidates.
It's absolutely true. That moderate Democrat fails to exist in a lot of these places anymore. And the reason for that is because unlike the Republican Party, where we appreciate diversity of thought, you cannot have diversity of thought in the Democrat Party. You think differently and they will cancel it. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a senator of the Democrat Party, a state senator here in California, switch her party to Republican. And immediately, the Latino caucus kicked her out of the caucus because you are not allowed to be a Latino and a Republican in the caucus in the California legislature. That is absolutely ridiculous. We have to have diversity of thought. But in the Democrat Party, there is no longer that middle of the road Democrat. You are not allowed to be that. You have to walk lockstep with them. Otherwise, you're canceled.
You know, you look at states with the high taxes, and you look at the outbound migration. It's not good to send people out from your tax base and replace them with people who are going to place demands on the state, right? You're really throwing yourself out of balance that way. I mean, if you lose 1 million taxpayers and take on 1 million, recipients, if you will, that's not good. And the Democrats are almost proud of themselves. Like, you look at states like Texas, Florida, Idaho is expanding because people, especially retirees, if you're on a fixed income, I don't know how you live in New York. I don't know how you do it.
It's not sustainable, and that's for sure. And not only that, but we're seeing it from our numbers here in California. In 2022 alone, 700,000 people left our state. The good news is when you ask about when are the voters going to wake up, I think we're seeing that change here in California. What's most interesting is what we've seen since October of last year. And in that time period, California Republicans have registered almost 200,000 new Republicans. In that same time period, Democrats have lost 112,000 registrations. So we're picking up in every single one of these congressional districts. It's not a specific area. It is all over our state. And I really, truly believe that they are waking up to the way California Democrats have failed them here.
You know, look, I call it bike path progressives, and I realize that it is kind of a gateway drug. I don't think you have to give up, what is unique or kitschy or kooky or whatever it is that makes California its own flavor. To be more reasonable with taxes and how you deal with state resources, that you put citizens to the I think you can be a Republican. You could vote Republican without giving up what it is aesthetically you like about California. I don't think it's one versus the other necessarily.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I stay here, Andrew. I know so many people are like, why don't you just leave? I think California is worth fighting for. And I remember the days where I grew up, where we had amazing governors and we had a legislature that put together, smart policies that protected its citizens and made this place a great place. It made it the Golden State. But what we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years with one-party rule has just absolutely failed Californians. And I think that there's a good group of us, and I think that's why we're seeing this movement on the registration. People are ready to fight for this great state and make it golden once again.
Well, let me say it like this. It's not working. Right? You can't seriously look me in the face, Gavin Newsom and the Democrats, and say a $68 billion shortfall means you're getting it right. You've got one-party rule. Okay, this is not happening because you've had to deal with Republicans on this stuff. You got one-party rule, a $68 billion shortfall, and now you're turning around to give home loans, $150,000 to people in the country illegally.
You're absolutely right. There is no one in the country that is looking at California saying that's what we should be doing. We continue to top all of the wrong lists continually, and it's because of the Democrats' one-party rule here.
It is insane. And until people, this is the simple truth, until people start voting differently, you're going to get more of this. This is what when I look at Kamala Harris, and I just, you want 4 more years of this? Because that's what you're going to get. You're voting for, you don't even know what you're voting for. There's nothing on her website that tells you what her policies are. Her staffers are just sending emails to media outlets. She's not telling us what she plans to do.
What's worse is what we've seen her do over the last 20 years here in California, whether it was as a district attorney in San Francisco, our attorney general, U.S. senator, of course, our vice president. Everybody has watched what she has done. You do not need to know what she will do. Anything that she could do, she would have done. And there's no reason to wait around to find out what she would do. We have already seen it from the last 20 years, whether it's soft on crime policies and everybody wants to feel more safe, to the pushing of Bidenomics that has absolutely put us in a situation where we have about 63% of the country that is living paycheck to paycheck. Our open border policies that's increased illegal migration by 140%. You do not have to wonder what Kamala Harris would do. She has already done it.
If she even, it's not even like she's saying, I suggested this to Joe Biden and, he didn't want to go my way on this. I mean, quite literally, there's no space between the failure of Biden and what will be the failure of Harris if she pulls it off.
You're absolutely right. There is no daylight between that. And she makes that clear every single time she speaks. We saw her yesterday with President Biden, and it was just ludicrous to watch how close she wants to tie herself to this failed administration.
Yes, and I'll be playing that clip in the next hour. Jessica Malone Patterson, chair of the California GOP, thanks for joining us.